I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Welcome to Friday. Tonight we're kicking off the show talking about taxes. How's that for a sexy topic? This impacts voters in Multnomah County, but hang on, the rest of you should pay attention too, because there's a chance this idea could, some will say should, come to your city or town as well. The tax would fund free lawyers for renters who face eviction, and that's our big story tonight. In general, it seems like a fair move that both sides of an eviction would have a lawyer. I mean, really, it'd be better if the two sides could just sit down and work something out. But I guess that's not always the case. So if there is going to be a legal fight, let's make it fair. That, says one of the co-chairs of the local effort, is how Multnomah County ended up with this ballot measure.
This ballot measure is part of the nationwide Right to Counsel movement. It's modeled after very successful measures all across the country that have shown that when you provide free legal representation for tenants being taken to eviction court or at risk of displacement, in a surprising number of cases, you can keep that tenant housed until they can be stabilized.
The most prominent leader in the Right to Counsel movement, as it's called, is New York City. It passed a law back in 2017 to give access to free legal counsel to lower income renters facing some sort of an eviction. It pays for the program with taxpayer money. A recent posting by the city reports that 84% of tenants in eviction proceedings who had a lawyer through this Right to Counsel program avoided eviction. That's a pretty high number. That's the good news. The bad news, the program is now so popular and New York eviction battles so common that the program has struggled, and it's going to need a ton of new money to keep up and offer lawyers to everyone who needs them. So, okay, it's having success with those it helps in New York, which leads us right back here to the vote in Multnomah County. The measure has one of those crazy numbers for a name. It's called Measure 26238. But instead of taxing everyone, this measure is different. It would only tax people who have capital gains. That's a term for the profit that you make when you sell something, like a property or a home or stocks or mutual funds, even digital currency. Now, this is not the first group to think of taxing those capital gains. The federal government has a capital gains tax. But unlike Measure 26238, the feds soften the blow. For example, they don't count the first $500,000 of profit when you sell your home if you're a married couple. But the wording of 26238 has no such exemption. It would tax everyone on every bit of capital gains they get. But John Bethencourt, the co-organizer we saw just a little bit ago, who's behind the measure, he says in practice, a similar exemption really would apply to the capital gains tax if it passes in Multnomah County. But it's not written in the measure, right? It literally does not say that.
Well, we refer to the federal tax calculations. We say, capital gains as defined by the Internal Revenue Code. And that's just the way people write ballot measures. We wrote it in the same style of other successful ballot measures like the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which are written in brief, high-level language outlining the parameters of the program and the key features.
The tax would start at 0.75%, but it would be adjustable, and it could go up or it could go down. On the other side of this argument, folks like the Portland Business Alliance say that tax would have a big and dramatic impact, even if it's unintended, on anyone at any income level trying to sell their home.
And so we got involved because here's a proposal that asks voters to raise taxes, and in large part on housing, in the middle of a housing crisis. And so it's our responsibility to stand up to proposals like this that may be well intended to help get tenants representation, but that impact the very thing that we know is driving our region to a place of unaffordability.
Those who are against it say the measure would hit homeowners who have seen their nest egg grow in their homes during the fast increases in value over the past several years. And then there is the question of the overall tax burden in Multnomah County. Voters in 2020 already approved a big income tax measure in the county that supports preschool for all, and a separate one for a metro tax for homeless services. The next year, more than 12,000 people, by the way, moved out of Multnomah County. Several groups have lined up to support the measure, including the Urban League of Portland, the Democratic Party of Multnomah County, and two major labor unions. On the other side, the Black Business Association of Oregon is against it, along with several elected leaders, including Congressman Earl Blumenauer, Metro's president, Portland's mayor, 2 county commissioners, and a whole bunch more. So, what are the chances of this thing passing? Well, I dialed up pollster John Horvick with DHM Research for his insights. His group asked about the measure late last year and found 40% were in favor, but 47% were against.
40%, if you sort of do a lot of campaign work and public opinion work at the beginning of a process, is quite low. Typically campaigns want to start with about 60% support for their issue, because it's not unusual, particularly when a contest is contested, for support to erode as you get closer to election day. Now, that said, if we look back in history, voters in Multnomah County have been very generous when it comes to tax measures.
So traditionally, Portland voters love new taxes. The last time voters said no to a new tax was for a Portland school bond way back in 2011. So yeah, it's been a while. And by the way, the very next year, voters did approve that measure. But Horvick says the Multnomah County capital gains tax is running into tax frustration right now. Many living in the county feel that they're already paying too much tax for too little service. And this is a different sort of tax, by the way, that voters are not used to.
This is a new mechanism. So we're not only asking voters to say yes to a tax measure, we're asking them to say yes to a tax measure that they've never even considered before locally. Another is that this is to support a group of individuals who don't represent the majority of voters in Multnomah County. That is, it's meant to protect renters, not only renters, but renters who are at risk of losing their housing. The vast majority of voters in this May special election are going to be homeowners. They're going to be older. They're not going to be people who, for the most part, are going to feel like they're going to directly benefit from this. So the other piece is that the proponents of this are not nearly as well organized or as well resourced as the opponents of this.
Finally, he says turnout could be low. They often are for these elections that are held in May. That could also hurt the capital gains tax, since it's typically younger voters, renters, who are absent when the turnout is low. Multnomah County told us today that every registered voter in the county should have their ballots by now, so it could be sitting in your mailbox if you haven't checked yet today. This proposal is on there, and hopefully now you have a better understanding of the issue before you cast your vote. One of the biggest stories from this week, by the way, the resignation of Oregon's Secretary of State, Shemia Fagan. It happened after it came out that she had a side job with a cannabis company paying her $10 grand a month. The owners of that company just happened to be big Fagan campaign supporters, and they were paying her while Fagan's auditors were reviewing the cannabis industry. All the news outlets in Oregon, of course, covered the story, but it actually originated from one of the smallest newsrooms in the state. Willamette Week only has 4 full-time employees in their news department, but they broke what so far is arguably the biggest story of the year. We talked with reporter Sophie Peel, who wrote the stories about Fagan and the cannabis company LaModa. She told us she had no idea how big this story was going to get.
So I first started working on the story about LaModa probably 3 months ago now. And, we just started looking at all the documentation we could around them, and there was really a lot there. It really started more as a story about disgruntled employees of LaModa. And then quickly we realized, oh, there's a lot more here. There's millions of dollars in tax liens. There's 30 lawsuits in Oregon, circuit courts over the past 5 years, many of those alleging non-payment of bills, including from the very tax company they hired to do their taxes last year. And they're really in an explosive lawsuit with them right now, which is going to go to trial in July. So, it was one of those stories where it seems like every thread you pull, it's a never ending ball of yarn almost. So there was just so much fodder there. And then, in the course of that reporting, I think what made this story interesting, besides the tax liens and the many lawsuits, is that they were climbing the ladder of political influence. So, they're young. Rosa Casares is 34, Aaron Mitchell is 45, and yet they were really prominent donors to Governor Tina Kotek, Secretary of State Shemia Fagan, to the Senate Leadership Fund. They were everywhere in Democratic politics, and they were hosting very swanky fundraisers at a mansion they were renting in the West Hills. They were kind of everywhere. And so initially that was their connection to Secretary Fagan, is that they hosted fundraisers for her. They had given her $45,000. You know, I knew during the reporting, I had learned that they did have some sort of kind of personal relationship too. Like they maybe were a little bit cozier with her than they were with other elected officials that they gave to. But again, the extent of that, you know, we didn't know. And then last Wednesday, I got an anonymous tip in my inbox that said, hey, you might want to ask these questions of Secretary Fagan. And we asked them, and thinking it wasn't, you know, I thought this is too unbelievable to be true. This is likely not true. Sent the questions over, and then, you know, less than 24 hours, we got confirmation of it. And then from there, it kind of unraveled.
Did it ever? Peel says there are still a lot of questions surrounding the story, including if Secretary Fagan violated any ethics laws, which the State Ethics Commission is now investigating, as well as how much sway LaMotta had over the Secretary of State's office.
They were prominent political donors. So when you have someone who is giving you a lot of money to your campaign and then you go to work for them, there are very natural questions about whether they are buying your influence. Another question too is that she admitted that she only met Rosa and Aaron once she decided to launch her 2020 campaign. So they didn't know her prior. And, you know, there are a lot of people who can do cannabis consulting. There are a lot of people who are well-qualified researchers. It doesn't really make sense that they would employ Fagan, who doesn't have consulting experience, who has a full-time job as a public, you know, as an elected official. It doesn't make sense that they would hire her except for her name. You know, you carry a lot of clout when you're Secretary of State for Oregon.
Sophie Peel, curious, tough, great job. Willamette Week has done a series of deep dives on this. In fact, it's their cover story right now. Certainly it's worth your time if you want to learn all the ins and outs about this scandal. And you can check out all of their articles right now on wweek.com.
Up next on the story.
It's scary down here, you think? Of course. Oh. Okay, let's go. Oh my God. Okay.
As Portland police officers work to combat crime, drugs, and the homeless crisis downtown, they've restarted the use of an on the ground.
They're used to seeing us driving by in cars, and we're usually so busy just going from call to call to call. We're equally out here to try to help people, see what we can do for them.
Foot patrols are underway around downtown's most notorious hotspots for drug use and violence, and our Blair Best tagged along to see what officers deal with day in and day out when the story returns.
The Portland Police Bureau is expanding an old-school approach when it comes to policing downtown. Teams of about 4 officers have started patrolling on foot. Last month, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler ordered them to do this around Southwest 4th and Washington after a slew of overdoses and drug deals there. Now they're expanding outside the downtown core. But as Blair Best reports, some days they don't get very far.
How's it going? Going all good?
It's about trying to help people like we always do, however we can.
It's all part of the latest tactic for Portland police.
Be safe out here, okay?
As they increase their presence and meet the city's most vulnerable where they are.
I've just been seeing this for about a couple of days.
Kylie has been homeless in Portland since she was 14. For her, seeing the police only means one thing.
Everybody's like, okay, we're all going to get arrested, because a lot of people who are living on the streets obviously deal with like opioid problems, methamphetamine problems and stuff like that, and the police necessarily don't have that good of a reputation. So
this team of 4 started Tuesday's afternoon walking patrol at Southwest 4th and Washington.
I would say downtown, this side of downtown into Old Town is probably the highest concentration of drug use that we get.
Sergeant Kyle Heffley and his team respond to about 10 overdoses a day.
If we can stay ahead of and just try to help people out and let them know that most of the time on the ODs, it's not somebody intentionally trying to take something that's going to kill them. They're taking something that they don't know what it is.
When it comes to drugs on Portland streets, fentanyl is the biggest concern for police. They're trying to catch people using and selling, but they're worried that this new flesh-eating drug, tranq, will soon be making its rounds, making the crisis out here even worse.
Let's go talk to him.
After circling the block, they run into a group of homeless people on the corner of Southwest 5th and Oak.
Portland is the best place to be homeless.
Portland is? Why is Portland the best place to be homeless?
Because you guys are so nice.
Turns out that woman was a diversion to a possible drug deal down the street.
Typically, the groups that are using and selling drugs, they'll see us, they'll scatter, or they'll have one person come up and talk to us kind of as a distraction, and then they'll take off and go elsewhere. But I mean, if we'll see as we go up here, they usually recongregate within 5 minutes or so.
It's an unusually quiet start to their shift, but that didn't last long.
He was in pursuit of this person. We're on bikes. He's trying to flee on foot right now.
1 block away, a driver escaping police after they tried writing him a ticket for smoking fentanyl behind the wheel, ran 2 red lights and flipped the car after crashing into 2 other vehicles.
We'll help you up, okay? We'll get you over to the ambulance.
Yeah, this is a pretty frequent, this is all the time. I mean, not a crash of this level, obviously. This is pretty horrible. But as far as stopping people for fentanyl use, between just the 4 bike officers, let's see, it's not even 2 o'clock. We've probably written 40 citations today for just open air drug use. Yeah.
And you write 40 citations. How many times do you try to get people into treatment or offer referrals?
That's the conversation. So every single one of those citations that we write, it comes with a card.
And on that card, per Measure 110, is a number for people to call for treatment. But rarely do they ever pick up the phone.
Generally, people are like, thanks, but no thanks. Quite a few times people will just throw the citation away right in front of us. We issue them, and it seems like they don't go anywhere. So it feels a bit helpless sometimes.
Sergeant Heffley's team moves forward. They recognize an 18-year-old known for dealing drugs downtown. They stopped him after he handed his bag off and kept walking.
The reason we're stopping you is people are selling drugs down here. People are dying, okay? A lot of people around your age.
The officers can't open his bag without his permission, which took 30 minutes to get.
I'm gonna have you sign this, and then we'll go from there. Do I want to take you to jail? No, okay?
Inside was a .22 caliber gun with 10 rounds and a bag of marijuana. He says he carries the gun for protection after getting stabbed 3 times last week.
Being out here and being present and having the ability to talk to people and do like we did today and take a gun off the street is beneficial to everybody downtown.
As they try to save lives, one step at a time.
They're used to seeing us driving by in cars, and we're usually so busy just going from call to call to call. But when we can walk up and have a conversation with somebody and let them know, hey, we're not just out here We're obviously trying to help the businesses and let them see us, but we're equally out here to try to help people, see what we can do for them.
In Southwest Portland, Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. Day 3 of the Senate Republican walkout in Salem today, meaning businesses in the chamber all stopped, all stalled. What we heard from lawmakers today, and we'll also share some of your thoughts after you flooded our inbox and voicemail last night. That's all when the story returns.
Straight ahead at 6:30, a young driver sentenced for a DUI crash that killed 2 teens and seriously injured a Washington County Sheriff's deputy. You're going to hear from that deputy coming up. Plus, new developments in the scandal surrounding Oregon's Secretary of State. The emails reportedly exchanged between her and a cannabis company ahead of a state audit. And a big moment for Magic Mushrooms as the first psilocybin service center clears its final hurdle. Where and when? That is next at 6:30. Hope to see you then.
Well, today in Salem, Republican senators continued their walkout. And because not enough senators are there for what's called a quorum, legally the Senate cannot do any business. So as the House continues to work on bills, the Senate continues to be stalled.
This is the 3rd straight day that we have failed to achieve a quorum on the floor of the Oregon State Senate.
As promised by Senate President Rob Wagner there, they are going to drag the session now into the weekend, with the Senate scheduled to convene at 9 a.m. tomorrow. While Republican leadership has said some members may get to that 10 unexcused absent threshold in order to test the constitutionality of voter-approved Measure 113. That measure passed last November as a way to stop walkouts like this very thing. Time will tell on that piece. But before we get to your comments, one other thing to note, a $2 million check from Nike co-founder Phil Knight just cleared into the account of a political action committee that seeks to get more Republicans elected to the legislature. The check was written a month ago before the walkout, and it's not his first contribution, but certainly interesting that the check was cashed as the walkout continues. During last night's show, we painted a clear picture about what this walkout is all about. The content of a few contentious bills themselves, not the readability of the bill summaries, which is how the Republicans are spinning this. We asked for your thoughts, and we got responses that kind of ranged on either side of the issue, with the majority of opinions sounding a lot like this.
This GOP walkout is typical of what they do. If they can't have their way, they take their ball and go home. they're just a bunch of whiners, in my opinion, and they need to pull up their big boy pants and sit down and vote no like we know they're going to do, and even if it passes. They just need to be adults and quit acting like little children.
And Scott wrote to us, the Republican Party's reason for their walkout is ridiculous, ludicrous, and transparently absurd. What it does show is that they have poor leadership and reading skills. And Liz says, give me a break. Repubs insisting they're walking out because bill summaries are unreadable? Seriously? Are they keeping a straight face when they say that? Yes, by the way, they are. And many of you feel very strongly about this, even those of you who are Republicans like Michelle.
As a lifelong Oregonian and Republican, I am utterly disgusted at the behavior of the Republican senators having the audacity to walk out and not do their job. I remember when they did this 15 years ago. I believe it was like, 10 or 15 years ago? And I was equally appalled then, and I wish that every single one of them could be fired or forbidden from ever running again. We voted for them to do a job, and they are not doing it. And I'm taking names, and I am not voting for these people again.
Of course, there are some of you who disagree with that, and you do agree with the way the Republicans are handling all this. Catherine says, when the Democrat politicians stop trying to civilly legalize immorality or making it a priority over necessary issues, then the Republicans have the right to be absent and not create a quorum. Democrat Party policies are the reason Oregon is in such bad shape. A viewer named Pat wrote to us to say, when the Senate Democrats tag all these so-called reproductive and gender-affirming issues, what do they expect the Republicans to do? Roll over? Heck no. Republicans have no tools to fight back for those of us Oregonians who believe in the sanctity of life and the rights of parents to protect our children from indoctrination and mutilation. Time will tell how long this walkout lasts, by the way. In the meantime, we wanted to highlight a few more viewer thoughts from folks who are appreciative of our work that we do here on The Story and our format that kind of sets us apart from the normal newscasts. And by the way, we're not just patting ourselves on the back just to feel good. Think of it kind of like a restaurant or a business who tout their good reviews and receive in an effort to attract more people into our community. Last night, Lori told us, thank you for the piece on the walkout. Your team did a fantastic job of breaking down the issues into understandable morsels of info. A++ journalism.
Thank you, Pat Doris, for your program, The Story. I love it. I love that you address the issue and give your opinion, whether everybody agrees with it or not. That's wonderful. And I just wanted to say, please keep it up and keep telling it like it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's not just me, there's a big team. I want to thank everyone for your feedback. We really do read all the emails and we listen to all the voicemails, and we appreciate the dialogue to make sure that we're plugged into the issues that you care about. That's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. Remember the story, our collective story? Well, that never ends. The team's already hard at work planning another great week of shows next week, but for now, stick around to catch the news at 6:30, and I'll see you on Monday.